Perfect tense of third Aleph verbs. In this module, we'll look at a variation of the cal perfect that we observed before, and we'll look at a weak verb. The cal perfect, the strong verb we looked at was pakad, if you remember. And the reason we call it strong is because all the root letters, or the radicals, are strong. They don't do funny things. And in this case here, we'll look at a third Aleph, which are verbs that have an Aleph in the third position. Now, the problem with Aleph, as we know, is that it can tend to quiesce. It will tend to quiesce at the end of a syllable. So, at the end of a syllable, we'll see some things happen. And there's two things that happen. I'll just summarize them here before we look at the paradigm itself. One is that we will get compensatory lengthening on the previous vowel. Compensatory lengthening. And we saw this before. It's not new. I'll write it out. And what we'll get is a patach will go to a kametz. Okay, which makes sense. Short A to long A. And it makes sense you get compensatory lengthening because if Aleph quiesces, it ceases to function as a consonant, you're making everything shorter. So you want something else to lengthen. In this case, it'll be the previous vowel. The second thing that happens is that the dagesh lene in the tav, that's in the suffix, disappears. Maybe I should show this with, well, we have tav in the suffix forms of some of these cal forms, right? So we have pakadta. It ended like this, pakadta. And what we had there is we had a syllable break here, but now with our new word, our third Aleph, we have an Aleph here and two other root letters. And if this ceases to function as a vowel, what happens is it loses this, even though it's just a syllable marker, a silent shabbat, it still loses it. And whatever vowel is here is now exposed to the dagesh lene. Or maybe I should say it the other way around. This dagesh lene now feels the presence of this vowel. Before, there was a consonant in between. But if this quiesces, then this feels its presence, and dagesh lene cannot exist in the presence of a vowel that it follows. If you recall your rules of dagesh lene, it will only stay present in a bagad kafat letter if there's no vowel preceding it, including even the smallest of vowels, like the vocal shava. So, the quiescing of the Aleph brings this vowel into play, and dagesh lene takes off, and the quiescing of the Aleph makes the previous vowel, if there's one there, I have to look at the paradigm and see which forms have a vowel here, but if it does have a vowel here, it will be a patach, and it'll lengthen to a kametz. Okay, now let's look at our paradigm. This here is the strong verb that we had, and I want to have that up as well so we can see what the differences are. It's really just those two things that change. And we're going to use the verb matzah, which means to find. I've written it out here already. Means to find, and it's got the Aleph in the third position. So all I have here are the roots, right? Just the radicals. Now my handwriting, as you can see, is bigger than the printing here, so it doesn't quite line up, but you get the point. So this is our reference point. How do we do this? Well, A is here. No problem. We're far away from the Alephs. No need to do anything there. Now normally we would expect a patach here, but the third radical here falls at the end of a syllable, end of the word as well, but end of the syllable is what's important. And so it quiesces, and so this previous vowel will lengthen. It was a patach, so it lengthens to a kametz. So basically what we need to do is look for all the forms that have a patach, or a vowel of any sort. It happens to be patach for all of them, just before the third radical. So we have it here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and here, right? Basically, it's all the forms except for these two. And these two, if you remember, are the pretonic reduction, the ones that have pretonic reduction because of the vocalic ending. Pakada, pakadu. The vocalic ending causes this to reduce. It already caused it to reduce. So there is no vowel there to lengthen. So for the rest of them, let's go ahead and put in our comments instead of patachs. And we may as well do the first one here too. So we have, so not that one, right? We have over here. We'll come back to the pretonic ones here in a moment. So we'll just put our vowels in. No problem. Over here we have, that's one of the pretonic ones. Oops, why did I have this here? Bad mistake. The perfect doesn't have a gender distinction. Cal perfect in the plural, third person. Okay, here we have, that's no problem. This one is going to lengthen as per usual because there's one there, a vowel there. So everything's behaving as we would expect it to behave. Okay, now if we had a syllable marker there, it disappears, no longer there. So we don't need that. Here and here, here and here, disappears, and here, all these here. So it's just naked. The Aleph is naked because it's quiesced. Now let's do our endings. Well, the first one here has no ending, so that's no problem. I'll skip this for a moment. So we have pakadta becomes matza. Guess it may as well be consistent here. Matza, and then we have ta. Now the second thing I said, the first thing that happens is you get compensatory lengthening on the previous vowel. So patach goes to comments. The other thing is that the dagash lene disappears because when this quiesces, it now exposes the dagash lene to this vowel. So in all these cases here, we put our endings on, but don't put your dagash lene in. Now, if you are pronouncing this in the probably historically correct way, this would now be tha, matzatha, matzath, matzathi. If you're running with modern Hebrew pronunciation, then you just pronounce it ta, but just know the dagash lene is not there. Same here, we'd have tem. I can squeeze them in here. Tem and ten without the dagash lene. And nu, well, there was no dagash lene there anyway, so that doesn't really matter for this one. Okay, let's be consistent here. And now let's go to this one. We have pakada. This now becomes ma tse a. In other words, there's no change. And can you see why there would be no change? Well, there's nothing here to lengthen, but really what's happening is that the Aleph is not at the end of a syllable. It's at the beginning of a syllable. Ma tse a. And Aleph at the beginning of a syllable doesn't quiesce. It's at the end where we have this problem, or this feature, if you wish. So in this form and in this form, there is no difference. Pakada becomes ma tse a. Pakadu becomes ma tse u. So those two, there is no change. These other ones, you have a lengthening of the patach to a kametz in all the second position there, the one previous to the Aleph. And if there is a tav ending, as in these ones here, and this one, then you have the dagash lene disappears. So I wouldn't memorize this thing. I would just know the two rules, know the two things that happen. Compensatory lengthening and the dagash lene disappearing in the tav. Takes off. And then you can reconstruct the paradigm from the Cal Perfect.